Hello, I'm Darren Magee, and today's question asks, how do you deal with someone who's delusional? Now, if you like this video, if you find it helpful, please click like and please consider subscribing to my channel. But just as a reminder, this video is not a substitute for support from a mental health professional, nor is it a tool to be used to diagnose someone. Now, when it comes to dealing with someone who's being delusional, this is a difficult question to answer. There's so many reasons why someone could be delusional, or seems to be delusional. But in clinical terms, a delusion would be categorized as a fixed, unshakable belief in something in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. And when we talk about someone who's being delusional, there could well be something else going on. There could be psychotic disorder, delusional disorder, schizophrenia. There could even be substance misuse. So when we talk about dealing with someone who's being delusional, we need to be careful about what we're talking about. What's going on with that person? Now, I've previously made videos on delusion disorder and pathological jealousy. I'll put the links in the description if you want to check those out. But there are also what would be called subclinical delusions. Now, these often look like someone who they're always focusing on the self, on themselves. Now, that could sound like, this is my fault, or you did that deliberately just to hurt me. Everything is personalized. Now, this could be because of, say, low self-esteem. It could be intense insecurity. There could be narcissism there, among other things. And subclinical delusions tend to be arrived at by jumping to conclusions, not using any kind of reasoning. People with subclinical delusions tend to look for evidence that fits the belief, or they'll twist something to fit the belief rather than challenge it. It's what's known as confirmation bias. Now, an example of that would be a woman who believed that her husband was cheating on her. He had been seeing sex workers. He had been messaging them and then deleting the messages so that she couldn't find them. Her evidence for that was whenever she took his phone without him knowing, whenever she took his phone and checked it, went through it, she couldn't find any messages. That reinforced her belief. Again, confirmation bias. Now, this can involve constant rumination over the delusion, looking for things that reinforce the delusion. Now, a different car parked on the street, that is now evidence that someone's being followed. A mark or a pain suddenly appearing on the body, even no matter how briefly, that is evidence that they now have something incurable. The slightest change of expression on their partner's face is evidence that they are cheating on them. But one way or another, the delusions are often arrived at by not using any kind of normal reasoning, and to others they may seem bizarre, but they can even be hurtful. And there are different kinds of delusion. There would be the grandiose delusion. Now, this could be someone believing that they are famous, they are powerful, the company needs them more than they need the company. The company would close down tomorrow if they were to leave. They had thought of some great wonderful idea, but someone else stole it. Then there are persecutory delusions. Now, this is someone who believes that everybody is out to get them. They are being conspired against, they're being followed, they're being monitored. Anything bad happens to them, it's because there is some sinister plot behind it. There are somatic delusions. Now, that could be someone who feels things physically, again, they have a pain somewhere, so it must be cancer, it must be something incurable. There are aromatic delusions. Now, that could be someone believing someone famous, someone important is in love with them, even though they've never actually met or have had any kind of contact. Lastly, there are jealous delusions. Now, this is the belief that the partner is cheating. Again, this is in spite of any lack of evidence for them cheating, or even if there is an abundance of evidence of them not cheating, the belief is still there. And sometimes the delusions can be a mix of 2, 3, or even more of these types of delusion. And when dealing with someone who's being delusional, there are different things to consider. Again, what kind of delusion is it? Is the person psychotic? Is it part of a disorder? Is there a diagnosis of some kind? Are they aware of some kind of condition they may have? Because they may just be misinformed. They may have a strong bias in a particular area. However, those kind of delusions tend to be temporary. They're of the moment. The person usually calms down, maybe sees reason, and may even apologize afterwards. But it's when it's continual, when any reassurance that person gets is only temporary, it's short-lived, or it shifts on to something else, then it could well be pathological. And it can be difficult to reason with someone who's pretty much made their mind up. Difficult to reason with someone who can't or won't listen to any kind of alternative. So aside from whatever delusion or whatever kind of delusion it may be, whatever the mental health issues may be underlying those delusions, I think sometimes there are three different kinds of people that we're dealing with. First of all, there's the self-righteous. Now they know for a fact they can't or won't hear anything different. They dismiss any explanation. They won't engage in any kind of debate or listen to any kind of reason. It is true because they think it. It is true because they feel it. It is true because they've worked it out in their head. They are right and they are entitled to be right. But then there's also I know this is a load of crap, I don't care, I'm just loving watching you scuttle about trying to explain yourself. These are the type of people who really don't care about the impact of what they're doing, as long as it gets them what they want. These are sometimes those kind of people who they make arrows for other people to shoot at each other. Lastly, there's the distressed. They want to be helped. They want to feel reassured. They want the panic. They want the distress to go away, but they find little reassurance regardless of whatever is said or whatever is shown to them. Now, all three kinds are irrational. They're just irrational in different ways, but it can still be difficult to deal with. So maybe let's look at what doesn't. For example, arguing generally doesn't work. I mean, how can you argue with someone who can see what you're thinking? So when dealing with someone who's being delusional, sometimes it's more about how you manage you, how you deal with you in that situation. Whatever it is you do, first thing I'll say is you do it carefully. You do it safely. You do nothing to antagonize, nothing that's going to put you or the other person, or indeed someone else, at risk. Try to do it with as little emotion as possible. Try to remain calm. Try to remain rational. Try to remain logical. Ask for clarity. Help me understand why you believe that. Is there a possibility that there may be a reasonable alternative? It's not necessarily about trying to change their mind. You may change their mind. They may come around to your way of thinking. Again, if it's pathological though, that change may only be temporary. Chances are it's going to come back, maybe in a different form, or maybe it'll just be the same thing over and over again. So again, looking at what else doesn't work. Well, say someone who's being jealous. Does giving them access to your phone, your email, your passwords to your social media, do you really think that's going to work? Are they going to stop accusing you of cheating? Because if you do, chances are the next thing you may be accused of cheating with someone you work with. So what do you do then? Do you quit your job? Do you stop going to work? You may be accused of cheating when you go to visit your mum. So what do you do then? Do you stop visiting your mother? The more we give in, the more we try to reassure, more often than not, we end up with absolutely no autonomy. All we're really doing is colluding with the delusion. And colluding with one delusion doesn't necessarily make it go away. More often than not, it can get worse. So, you may even end up being accused of thinking. So how do you stop thinking? Well, what can sometimes help is, whenever possible, try to intervene before the belief becomes fixed, before the behavior becomes normalized. Now, there may be indicators such as, they may have reported their previous partners cheated, or there may be little remarks about you finding someone else attractive. I saw you looking at such and such. It can be easier sometimes to convince them that they're mistaken before the delusion becomes embedded. But again, remember, that person's mind may only be changed temporarily, but handling it differently, looking at how you handle yourself, we can do little things to stop it becoming embedded as a solid fact. We can stop it getting to the point where we have to do all the work to prove our innocence. And again, this isn't always easy. Again, it depends on the types and the severity of the delusions, as well as the type of person that we're dealing with. But again, what doesn't work is judging someone, telling them they're being ridiculous, telling them they're being crazy. So maybe, and I know this sounds uncomfortable, but maybe hear them out. Give them the opportunity to hear themselves speak. Sometimes, not always immediately and not all the time, but sometimes the more someone talks, the more they get to hear themselves speak. The more they may realize what they're saying isn't that realistic. openly challenging, being sarcastic, being overly defensive to the other person, that may ground the delusion even further. As much as doing what you can to reassure them may ground it even further. Remember, it's not always the delusion itself, but it is how they react to being told, say, they're insane, or being told they're wrong, or even getting what they want because of their delusion. These things tend to embed it further. Even think about it. Has anyone ever been convinced of anything by being told that they're stupid for thinking that? So again, maybe ask them what evidence they have. If they see two people talking together, that is evidence of two people talking, not two people plotting. If they see you talking to someone else, that is evidence of you having a conversation, not evidence that you're cheating. Because again, looking at this the other way around, you imagine someone goes to the police and they say, I know someone, that person over there, they murdered someone. So the police are going to ask, well, who did they murder? I don't know. Well, did you witness it? No. Did they tell you they murdered someone? No, they just keep on denying it. Well, did you see blood on their clothes or anything? No. Do you know where the body is? Do you have a body? No, they won't say where the body is. But I know for a fact that they did. Now, when you look at it that way, an accusation is not evidence. Someone may believe they have a very serious illness. Doing a search on the internet is not a medical diagnosis. If they believe they're being followed, the guy walking behind them today, that's evidence of someone walking in the same direction, not necessarily following them. So maybe ask them, what might change their mind? Now, they may not have an answer straight away, but it might get them thinking. Again, if they say nothing's going to change my mind, then you could be dealing with something pathological. But if you do have something to disprove their delusion, try presenting it in a way that is kind and flexible, in a way that might invite them to think about it rather than presenting it as a hard fact. Remember, it is the reaction that often embeds it further or makes it shift to something else. And again, depending on the kind of delusion, it could, what you're saying might be right, but I'm not convinced by your reasoning. The internet says, yes, they are symptoms of whatever, but you didn't have those symptoms. And your doctor said it wasn't that. Your doctor said it was something else. Yes, the government probably does do things we don't always know about, but I'm wondering, why would they target you in particular? If the delusions aren't addressed, they can get worse. If you collude with them, they could get worse. If you keep doing things to try to reassure them, they could get worse. If you keep fighting your corner, they tend to get worse. So again, being logical, being rational, yet kind, you observe, but you don't absorb any of it. Remember, if there is a mental health diagnosis or if the delusions are pathological, again, this is about you managing you, not them. And there is always disengage. Remember the question from earlier, is there anything that might change your mind about this? Now, if they say nothing, then how are you going to have a discussion about that? And I can't emphasize this enough. If you are going to disengage, you do not antagonize, you do not provoke, you keep yourself safe. If you have to disengage, you do it politely, you do it calmly. And lastly, it can be easier. Now, if there's a mental health professional involved, supporting the person who's being delusional, if that person maybe has a diagnosis, recognizes they're delusional, it can be easier to work with them because they maybe have an understanding of what they're going through. The difficulty is, though, is when they don't or won't get help. If the delusions are subclinical, like I said earlier, it's more about you keeping yourself safe, managing your own boundaries. Maybe invite them to have the same conversation they're having with you, to have that with, say, their counsellor. If it's a relationship you're in, invite them to think about the both of you having the same conversation with a relationship therapist. Try to make it sound like a win-win scenario rather than a win-lose one. But ultimately, managing someone with a delusion disorder of some kind, it can be difficult, but there are just some thoughts on maybe how to do it. So if you have any comments, please use the comment box below. I do like reading them and responding to them whenever I can, and I'm interested in some of the interesting conversations that are generated around these videos. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel for future updates on mental health related topics. And until next time, thanks for watching.